The heavy steel barrel of the revolver pressed so hard into the hollow of Min-jun's throat that he could taste the gun oil. Rain hammered against the rusted roof of the shipping container, sounding like 1,000 frantic heartbeats. Facing him wasn't a hitman or a rival enforcer, but a woman with silver hair and a back bent by 60 years of carrying laundry. Her hands, calloused and mapped with blue veins, didn't shake as she pulled the hammer back. The click echoed in the silence between thunderclaps. Min-jun, a man who controlled the flow of billions through the ports of Busan, didn't reach for the knife in his boot. He didn't signal the 20 snipers hidden in the cranes above. Instead, he let his knees hit the blood-stained gravel, his silk suit soaking up the filth of the gutter. 3 hours ago, Min-jun was the undisputed shadow king of the peninsula, a man whose name made governors stutter. He had spent 20 years erasing every shred of the starving orphan he used to be, building an empire on cold logic and bone-deep ruthlessness. He thought he had buried his past under the concrete of 100 skyscrapers. He was wrong. A single photograph, found in the pocket of a dead informant, had ripped the world open. It showed a woman he hadn't seen in 2 decades, the woman now holding a weapon to his life. This is the account of the night the Dragon of Busan found the one debt he couldn't pay with money, and the one person who remembered the boy before the monster was born. Min-jun's fingers, adorned with rings that cost more than the shanty town behind them, dug into the wet earth. He didn't look up at the gun. He looked at the woman's shoes, cheap, plastic sandals held together by duct tape. "Do it, Halmiani," he whispered, the polished edges of his voice cracking like dry wood. The woman, Mrs. Kim, didn't blink. A bead of rain rolled down her nose and fell onto the revolver cylinder. "You think a suit makes you a man? You think the blood on your hands can be washed off with a bow?" Behind them, the docks were a graveyard of shipping crates and industrial waste. This was the territory Min-jun had bled for, but now it felt like a cage. He had arrived here to execute a traitor, only to find the mother of the man he'd already sent to the bottom of the ocean. The first complication had arrived 30 minutes prior. Min-jun's second-in-command, a man named Gwang-ho with a jagged scar running from ear to chin, stepped out of the shadows. He didn't look at the woman. He looked at Min-jun on his knees. "Boss," Gwang-ho's voice was a low rumble. "The council is watching the feed. You don't kneel. Not to a peasant. Not to anyone. If you don't stand up, I have to finish this." Min-jun didn't move. He felt the heat of the gun barrel against his skin. Mrs. Kim leaned closer, her breath smelling of ginger and cheap cigarettes. "Tell him, Min-jun," she hissed. "Tell him whose son you killed today." Min-jun's chest constricted. The air felt thick like he was breathing underwater. He saw the red laser dot of a sniper rifle appear on Mrs. Kim's chest, dancing over her faded floral cardigan. "Stand down." Min-jun roared at the darkness, his voice bouncing off the steel walls. Gwang-ho didn't lower his weapon. "The dragon doesn't have a mother. The dragon doesn't have a heart. That's what you taught us. If you're weak, you're dead." The hammer of Mrs. Kim's gun moved another millimeter. She wasn't looking at the snipers. She was looking into Min-jun's eyes, searching for the boy who used to share a single bowl of rice with her son in the back of a damp basement. She saw the scar on Min-jun's forehead, the one he got protecting her son from a debt collector 15 years ago. "I didn't know," Min-jun rasped. "You didn't care," she replied. The sky tore open with a flash of lightning, illuminating the 1,000-yard stare of a man who realized his entire empire was built on the bones of the only people who ever loved him. He reached out, his hand hovering over the barrel of the gun, and slowly pulled it toward his own forehead. The transition from the docks to the high-rise was a blur of neon and wet asphalt. Min-jun's office occupied the top floor of the Latte Tower, a glass fortress that looked down on the flickering lights of Seoul. Gwang-ho stood by the mahogany desk, his knuckles white as he gripped a tablet showing the plunging stocks of their shipping firm. "The council is calling for a vote," Gwang-ho said, slamming the tablet down. The screen shattered. "They saw you. They saw the dragon, begging for mercy from a washerwoman. They think you've lost your mind." Min-jun stood by the window, his reflection a ghost against the rain-streaked glass. He had changed into a fresh suit, but his skin still felt itchy with the filth of the docks. He pulled a small, crumpled envelope from his pocket. Inside was a lock of hair and a gold tooth, the remains of the man his men had processed in the furnace that morning. "Gwang-ho," Min-jun said without turning. "How many men did we lose in the 2018 purge?" 32. "Why? And how many of them had mothers?" Gwang-ho stepped forward, the shadows of the office clinging to his heavy brow. "We aren't in the business of genealogy. We're in the business of survival. If you don't authorize the hit on Mrs. Kim by sunrise, the council will authorize one on you. Min-jun turned. The cold, calculating light was back in his eyes, but it was directed at Gwang-ho. I want the records of every man we've removed in the last 5 years. I want their addresses. I want to know who is left behind. You're digging your own grave? Gwang-ho spat. The orphan who climbed to the top is trying to crawl back into the dirt. Min-jun didn't respond. He sat at his desk and opened a drawer, revealing a heavy, antique ledger. It wasn't filled with account numbers or cargo manifests. It was a list of names, written in the shaky handwriting of a teenager. The first name on the list was Kim Soo-bin, the man who had died that morning. The phone on the desk vibrated. It was a private line. "Boss," the voice on the other end was frantic. "The snipers didn't wait for your order. They tracked her back to the tenement. They're moving in now." Min-jun vaulted over the desk, his chair spinning wildly. He didn't grab his coat. He grabbed the ledger and a heavy black case from the safe. If you believe Min-jun should burn his empire to save the woman who raised him, hit the like button so this story reaches the ones who understand that loyalty isn't bought, it's earned. The elevator ride down felt like an eternity. Every floor he passed represented a year of his life he'd spent running away from the truth. By the time he hit the lobby, his car was already idling. He drove like a man possessed, weaving through the gridlock of Seoul, his eyes fixed on the GPS coordinates of the shantytown. He arrived to find the narrow alleyways swarming with men in black windbreakers. Silence was the weapon of choice here. No sirens, no shouting. Just the muffled thud of doors being kicked in. Min-jun stepped out of the car, his presence cutting through the chaos like a blade. He saw a man leveling a silenced pistol at a wooden door marked with a red cross. "Drop it," Min-jun commanded. The man turned, surprised. "Boss?" Gwang-ho said. Min-jun didn't let him finish. He delivered a swift, brutal kick to the man's knee, followed by a palm strike to the chin. The hitman slumped. Min-jun didn't stop to check the pulse. He burst through the door. Mrs. Kim was sitting at a low table, a single candle burning in the center. She was folding a white funeral shroud. She didn't look up when he entered. "You're late," she said. "Get up," Min-jun panted. "We have to go. Now." "I've lived in this room for 40 years, Min-jun. I'm not leaving so you can feel better about yourself." A shadow crossed the window. A flashbang grenade rolled across the floor, hissing. Min-jun dived, wrapping his body around Mrs. Kim just as the world exploded in white light and deafening sound. The world was a muffled, ringing haze. Min-jun dragged Mrs. Kim behind the heavy oak dresser as glass rained down like diamonds. 3 men burst through the window, their silhouettes strobing in the moonlight. Min-jun didn't use a gun. He used a heavy industrial stapler and a kitchen knife. The combat was frantic, silent, and wet. When the last man fell, Min-jun was gasping, a deep gash opening along his ribs. He looked at Mrs. Kim. She was staring at the man on the floor, a boy no older than 20. "He's just a child," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He's a soldier," Min-jun corrected, his voice hard. "And there are 50 more coming." He hauled her toward the back exit, through a hidden crawlspace he remembered from his youth. They emerged in a narrow drainage pipe that led toward the river. The air smelled of sewage and old iron. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her plastic sandals clicking on the concrete. "You killed my Soo-bin. You are the reason I am alone." "I can't bring him back," Min-jun said, his hand pressed against his bleeding side. "But I won't let them take you too. Soo-bin died protecting a secret he thought would save you. He was wrong. The only thing that saves you is me." They reached a black sedan parked under the Mapo Bridge. Gwang-ho was leaning against the hood, a cigarette dangling from his lip. He held a detonator in his hand. "I knew you'd use the pipes," Gwang-ho said, his voice flat. "Old habits die hard." "Gwang-ho, let her go," Min-jun said, stepping in front of Mrs. Kim. "The council has already replaced you, Min-jun. I'm the new dragon. And a dragon doesn't have a mother, remember? She's a loose end. And you're a ghost." Gwang-ho raised the detonator. "I rigged the tenement. If I press this, 40 families disappear. Unless you give me the ledger. The real one. The one with the council's signatures." Min-jun felt the weight of the book in his waistband. It was the only leverage he had. If he gave it up, he was dead. If he didn't, the people he grew up with would burn. If you think the life of 40 strangers is worth more than the power of a king, drop a like so the algorithm knows where your heart lies. Min-jun looked at Mrs. Kim. She was watching him, her eyes reflecting the distant lights of the city. She wasn't afraid. She was waiting to see if the boy she knew was truly gone. "Take it," Min-jun said, pulling the ledger out. He tossed it into the dirt at Gwang Ho's feet. Gwang Ho grinned, a jagged, ugly expression. He picked up the book, flipping through the pages. You always were a sentimental fool, Min-jun. That's why you were a great boss. But it's why you're a terrible survivor. Gwang Ho didn't lower the detonator. He stepped back toward his own car. I'll keep the ledger. But I'm still pressing the button. The council likes a clean slate. Min-jun didn't wait. He launched himself at Gwang Ho, a scream ripping from his lungs. They collided in a flurry of limbs and steel. The detonator skittered across the pavement. Mrs. Kim didn't scream. She dived for the device. Min-jun felt a sharp pain in his shoulder as Gwang Ho's knife found a gap in his guard. He ignored it, slamming his forehead into Gwang Ho's nose. The sound of breaking bone was wet and sharp. He pinned Gwang Ho to the ground, his hands locking around the other man's throat. The dragon is dead, Min-jun hissed, his vision blurring. Gwang Ho's face turned purple. His hands clawed at Min-jun's wrists, leaving deep furrows in the skin. Min-jun. Stop. It was Mrs. Kim. She was holding the detonator, her thumb hovering over the red button. If you kill him like this, you're just like them, she cried. Let him go. Let the law take what's left. There is no law for us. Min-jun roared. Then make one, she shouted back. Min-jun looked down at Gwang Ho's bulging eyes. He saw the reflection of a monster. He saw the man who had ordered the death of his best friend. Slowly his fingers uncurled. Gwang Ho slumped, gasping for air, clutching his throat. Min-jun stood up, his body screaming in pain. He walked over to Mrs. Kim and took the detonator from her hand. He didn't look at it. He threw it into the dark waters of the Han River. It's over, he said. But as he turned to lead her to the car, a single gunshot echoed under the bridge. Min-jun felt a strange impact in his back. He stumbled, his legs turning to water. He looked down to see a small dark hole opening in the center of his chest. Gwang Ho was standing 10 feet away, a small backup piece trembling in his hand. He was laughing, a hysterical, broken sound. I told you, Gwang Ho wheezed. A dragon doesn't survive. Min-jun fell to his knees. The gravel felt cold. The rain felt like a blessing. He felt Mrs. Kim's arms wrap around him, pulling his head into her lap. No, 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 she whispered, her tears mixing with the rain on his face. Halmiani, Min-jun breathed, a crimson bubble forming on his lips. The ledger, check, page 40. His eyes drifted shut. The sound of the river faded into the sound of a woman's soft, grieving wail. The hospital room smelled of lemon-scented floor wax and industrial-strength peace. Min-jun opened his eyes to see a ceiling that didn't move. He tried to sit up, but a sharp pull in his chest forced him back down. Don't, a voice said. Mrs. Kim was sitting in a chair by the bed. She looked different. She was wearing a clean, high-quality sweater, and her hair was neatly pinned. She was holding a newspaper. The dragon is dead, she said, showing him the headline. Busan shipping mogul missing, presumed dead in pure explosion. Council members arrested in massive sting. Gwang Ho? Min-jun asked, his voice a ghost of its former self. He tried to use the ledger to buy his way out. He didn't realize you'd replaced the signatures with evidence of his own murders. He's in a high-security ward. He won't be coming out. Min-jun looked at his hands. They were bandaged, white and sterile. And the shantytown? The money from the offshore accounts? The ones you listed on page 40? It's being used to rebuild. They call it the Subin Foundation. She stood up and walked to the bed. She reached out and smoothed the hair back from his forehead, her touch light and warm. You're a ghost now, Min-jun. No money. No empire. No dragon. I know, he said. You're just an orphan again. I know. She smiled, a small, sad and beautiful thing. Well, an orphan needs a home. And I still have that basement. It's been cleaned. Min-jun felt a weight lift from his chest that had been there for 20 years. He reached out and took her hand. It was rough, calloused and perfect. If you believe that the greatest victory isn't winning a war, but finding your way home, drop a like so this story stays with those who are still lost. The door to the hospital room opened. A young nurse walked in, checking a clipboard. She looked at the two of them, an old woman and a scarred man holding hands. Is he a relative? The nurse asked. Mrs. Kim didn't hesitate. She squeezed Min-jun's hand. He's my son, she said. Min-jun closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, he didn't have to look over his shoulder. He didn't have to plan the next kill. He just listened to the steady rhythmic beep of the heart monitor, a sound that told him he was alive, he was loved, and the debt was finally beautifully paid in full. Outside, the sun was breaking through the clouds over Seoul, reflecting off the glass towers he used to own. They looked small from here. They looked like toys. He didn't want them back. He had everything he needed in the palm of a washerwoman's hand. The dragon had died in the mud of the docks, but the boy had walked out of the hospital. And as the city began its morning rush, a black car pulled up to the hospital entrance, not to take a kingpin to his throne, but to take a son back to the basement where the rice was always hot, and the mother's love was the only law that mattered.